All right, we're starting to see the attendees start popping in here. If you can hear us, go ahead and let us know where you're from. We're going to be getting this started here in the next couple of minutes. I'll be introducing this incredible gentleman here who's going to be talking to you about manufacturing and all that other good stuff. So, and what it's like to bring products to life. And so if you can hear me, go ahead, let me know in chat. Really excited to hear where you guys are from, who you're calling in, where you're calling in from. And also let me know, what are you looking to manufacture? What kind of category are you in? I think that'd be like a really fun question to learn more about who's on this right now. Nice, we got Portland, Oregon. Cool, cool, cool. I myself am in North Carolina. Patrick, where are you calling in from?
I'm in Portland, Oregon, a very smoky Portland, Oregon.
Very smoky. How is it? How's it going out there right now?
It's not so pretty. We haven't seen the sun, I think, in about a week.
Oof.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, stay safe, stay indoors, keep those air filters going. Yeah, that's nuts, man. We got San Diego, we got Toronto, IoT appliance. That's awesome. So super, super exciting. So as you guys are hopping in here, I know I'm sure people are going to slowly be kind of like trickling their way in, but I'm going to go over some housekeeping bits before I introduce this incredible gentleman here with me today. Yeah, need the Alberos. Yeah, Andrew knows what's up. How's it going, Andrew? Yeah, and Lucia, amazing. And so guys, some quick kind of details. Save your questions for the end. Actually, well, save them immediately by using the Q&A tool at the bottom of the screen. So you'll notice there's a Q&A tool. You can get your questions asked. And that way, at the end of this presentation from Patrick, we'll be able to go through those questions with you. Get your questions in regards to manufacturing. If you've got questions outside of that, just crowdfunding in general, I'm here to support Patrick as well. Patrick's a crowdfunding veteran as well. I'm sure he's got a lot of really fun things to share. And so definitely get your questions in there. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Patrick Soong. He is the CEO of Alliance Trading Group, and he is here to teach you all how to bring your products to life. I'll be letting him kind of lead the show. I'll be disappearing and coming back when it's time for some amazing questions. So without further ado, Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you to Launchboom and Will, you, Tom, and Mark for putting this all together. This is pretty special. So good afternoon. My name is Patrick Soong, and like I said, I'm speaking to you from a very, very smoky Portland, Oregon. Honestly, I haven't been outside my house in over a week, and I feel like I'm going a little crazy in my own house with 2 kids. So, but I'm also the CEO of Alliance Trading Group. I'm sure you've never heard of me or of my company. So I'll spend a minute here to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about what we do. We are a sourcing, product development, and supply chain management firm. My father started this business as a sourcing agent in 1985 when fax machines were at the height of popularity. My father built this company on sourcing industrial goods like PC boards, battery packs, and other fun, exciting products like that. He became successful by working hard and finding good factories, but I remind you that this was in the late 80s and the 90s, and he did it while being opaque and very protective of his resources, which was, to be fair, how you survived as a sourcing agent during this time. He had always told me, keep your sources a secret, don't let your customers visit the factories without you, and never let your customers and vendors speak directly to each other. So as a sourcing agent, this is what he felt like he had to do to prevent getting cut out. But as the internet became more prevalent, I realized that opacity just won't work. It won't earn a customer's trust, and we're impeding progress by doing so. Plus, being a sourcing agent wasn't bringing enough value to the table. Sourcing in itself is very valuable, but it can also be a one-time deal. And if that's the value you're bringing to the table, then okay, but it really might not be enough. So I worked with my customers and vendors to open up everything: pricing, profit margins, sources, direct communication, everything while being a project manager and connecting our customers and vendors by communication through live documents. We started building supply chains on Google Docs. And eventually, as we've grown, we've graduated to NetSuite. But we managed our sample orders, our purchase orders, our finances, forecasting, pricing and shipping. And we did the same when we started working with Peak Design in 2012. For those of you unfamiliar with Peak Design, we started working with Peak when they were a $700,000 company back then. Today, they're a $70 million company. Now, I'm not saying that if you work with us, you're going to 100x in a decade, but my point is that when you have a healthy and transparent supply chain, it means you can always focus your vision forward. You can build your brand. You could focus on sales, marketing, copywriting, anything that's customer facing, while you don't have to focus on as much of how your product is arriving. So if there's one thing that you can take from this talk today, I hope that you will understand how important it is to work with vendors who are transparent. These are just a few of the brands that we work with, so you have a little bit more of an idea of the products that we make and what we've done. We've been involved with some of the largest Kickstarters out there as well. Here you see Peak Design, Nomatic, Orbitkey, Statgear, Magmod, Fidget Cube. That was a wild one. The most recent travel tripod by Peak Design. A little bit of just kind of everything, bags, hardware, consumer electronics, and the like. So if you've backed some of these projects or you're familiar with Kickstarter, obviously you're here for that reason. You'll definitely have a slightly more familiar context to this talk, but if you haven't, that's not a problem either. So in this talk today, I'm going to be talking about and covering everything related to sourcing, product development, planning for mass production for your Kickstarter campaign, and what happens with life after Kickstarter. And we'll talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how the US-China tensions and the trade war are changing the manufacturing landscape in Asia. And then at the end, as Tom mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So before I dive into that agenda, I want to make sure that everyone understands a general process of how you bring your products to life. Design is number one. You need a drawing or a 3D file of some sort, something that the factory needs to be able to digest your intentions, and they can use that design to produce a sample and a quote. Number two, sourcing a factory. We'll get into this shortly. Number three, developing your product. This is where samples and prototypes are made to finalize your product before mass production. Number four, establish quality measures. So the quality measures are a whole nother subject, but this really, in the scope of what we're talking about, draws a line in the sand for liability and what criteria that needs to be met in order for the factory to let any product leave their door. Number five, mass production, relatively self-explanatory, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it. Number six, utilizing that quality control. So using that checklist from number four, ensuring that these quality measures are being executed on. And then seven, shipping and logistics. So getting the product from the factory to ultimately wherever you need it. So sourcing. Where do you start? Sourcing is really a game of who you know and who you can trust. And if you're starting with little experience, or even if you're in a company and you're looking to find better vendors, I would recommend that you talk to companies that you respect, that are happy with their supply chains and happy with their vendors. So some companies, they'll be guarded with their supply chain, which is totally understandable because they have IP to protect. And then some companies want to see more business flow to their vendors and try to build a healthier supply chain. And they're happy to refer you to them. One thing is that nobody will tell you that their vendors are 100% perfect. There are always going to be flaws. Just like you may have your own character flaws, or your business might have some issues to work on, but finding one that is organized, proactive, and has a view for your long-term health and business will help your company succeed. So when you're meeting new vendors and you're establishing communication with them, would like for you to look for these things. One, proactivity. Be proactive and not reactive. This might seem obvious, but you want vendors who are asking you for feedback, timelines, and asking for what's next. This is something that we embody as a core value of our company, ATG. And you want to work with people who are going to drive those action items and ensure that you and others are staying on task. 2, from paper to product. So when you hand-drawn sketch to how you bring it to life. Well, you want a company that has the ability to digest your design, your files, or whatever materials you're selecting. And this basically means when you're working with a factory, you're looking for a good engineering department or a good sample making department. 3, transparent quotes. So this one's one of the more important ones, but providing clear, transparent quotes that details the entire bill of materials, showing every component's cost, materials, and source is extremely important. And they should list this out. They should also list out their overhead, their profit margins, labor costs, or any other costs that might be relevant to your product. And I'll dive into this a little bit more in a second here. And then 4, find a friend for life. This is a little hokey, but you want a partnership with someone for the long term, not just someone who's going to look to make a quick buck off of you. If you view it as like you're looking for a friend, you're looking for someone that you want to be working with, well, you want someone who you obviously like and get along with professionally. So look always for the long-term goals. If you see signs of someone trying to make a quick buck off of you, just get out, run. You want, in regards to that transparency, you want vendors who are eager to know what's going to happen next in your plans. You want to think about all of the people in your life. They're all different. They're all unique. They're driven by different values, different political beliefs, different socioeconomic statuses, and with them, you each have different levels of friendship. So you try to surround yourself with the people that are transparent and that you can trust, people that you like and want to be friends with. And the same goes with your companies and your vendors to some degree. The companies that you surround yourself with are important, and you have to know that you can trust every person at that company and every cog in the machine to do what you expect them to do. And then in turn, that they can expect the same level of trust from you. And it's for this reason that I believe working with small to medium-sized companies with long-term goals are an excellent way to build your supply chain. And yes, it can be nice to work with a giant, but if you're small fish, you're going to get bumped to the back of the line the moment that there's any adversity. With a small to medium-sized company, you generally get more boutique service, more support, less rigidity when it comes to production planning, payment terms, cash flow planning, minimum quantities, etc. And so I'll give you an example here. When I was introducing Peak Design to bag vendors to develop and manufacture their everyday messenger bag, this was in 2014, I was by myself. I didn't have the company that I have now, or the people that I have now. And I really wasn't experienced with bags, but I was pretty well connected and I had some deep resources. So I sourced 2 factories in Vietnam. I'll call them Factory A and Factory B. We booked a 2-week trip to visit and work with both of them. And I'll note here that Factory A was a referral from a good friend of mine. So Factory A. Factory A is huge. We stepped onto their production floor and honestly, we were just blown away. We couldn't even see the walls at the other end of the room. Factory B was 20 employees in a sample room with one small factory that they partnered with. Factory A makes bags for just about every brand name you've ever heard of. Marc Jacobs, Kate Spade, North Face, you can read the list, but it goes on and on. So if you can think of a big bag brand, they've probably worked with them. Factory B was 1 month old at the time of our visit and had no brands, no customers at the time. And it should be noted at this time that the owner of Factory B came from Factory A and held a high position at Factory A for almost a decade. Factory A had an entire room full of swatches and other materials. And I remember Art, the lead designer at Peak Design, when he was going into that room, it was like a little kid in a candy store. It was something to watch. Factory B had sample books. Factory A, when we arrived, delivered us a near perfect sample for what we designed, and Factory B provided us a sample that I would probably call disappointing. But there was one big difference between the two. We were working with both of them simultaneously, and through the end of that first week, the project manager at Factory A came up to me privately and said, our boss knows you're working with Factory B and he's pissed. So I said, okay, can I have a meeting with him? And I want to understand why he's pissed, because I don't want to make any enemies in this field. And he proceeded to tell me, when I had the meeting, he told me the Peak guys were a pain in the ass, that we had no idea what we were doing, and that they thought, honestly, that the bag was terrible. And to be honest, he was right. We were a pain in the ass. The Peak guys asked all the wrong questions, and the bag was terrible. He then told me that we were here specifically as a favor to my friend who introduced us, and that, frankly, he didn't care if we chose Factory A or not. And he said if we worked with them, that they'd give us their full support, but if we didn't, that's fine. It didn't matter to him. Later that day, Factory B showed up at our hotel with a promising sample, and the owner told me, I started this business to create long-term relationships, and frankly, I want a friend, and I want a partner in this, and I want to be close to the people that I do business with. So tell me what I need to do to earn Peak's business. So after that, I advised the Peak guys that Factory A will make us a killer product. They'll probably be more expensive, but they don't really want to work with us. And if you had known anything about Peak at this time, they were extremely detail oriented. So they wanted to know literally everything that they could possibly know. I don't think that Factory A would have had the patience for us. So if we went with Factory B, we'd have a little bit more catching up to do, but we would get all the service that you would possibly need to make this product come off the ground. So at the end of the day, we chose Factory B. And they've been the ones who are responsible for every Peak design bag ever made. They just recently, last year, opened up a brand new $5 million factory in Vietnam, and we'll still continue to provide that boutique service that Peak and all of our other customers who make bags want and need. So this is just one example of why maybe the largest factory isn't your best bet if you're small, and maybe why a smaller company might be better to build with. You know, it's not representative of everyone, but it's a general theme that we know exists in this field. Transparency. So I was referring to transparency a little bit earlier. Many of the sales calls that call on us already work with factories for the most part, specifically in China. They have varying degrees of comfort with these factories. One of them, one of the main things that we really see that people struggle with is that factories make their goods, provide and sell their goods with one single unit price. A single unit price like like a $30 bag. Just 30.00, 30.00, something like that. That hides a ton of costs, a ton of profit. And then they also are able to conceal their materials and their sources. And it kind of sounds like that opacity that I was referring to earlier. So I've spoken to these bag companies that, let's say, have a handful of already existing SKUs, and I ask them, where do you source your materials? And they'll say, I don't know. I have no idea. Our factory does that for us, but they won't tell us where they get it. Red flag. What this means is that this factory now holds some form of leverage over your business. If you want to find a new vendor, have a falling out with this vendor, you want to lower the price of your goods with this vendor, you have almost no levers to pull. And you have no way of replicating that bag somewhere else because you don't know where your fabric is made and you don't know how to make it somewhere else. Most bag companies can countersample if they have a physical sample in their hands, but it will be different. If you sent out 5 you sent out 5 samples of the same product to 5 different bag factories, you will get back 5 different samples with 5 different prices. So they can countersample with a physical sample in their hands, but it'll be different. You just don't really know how. So with that $30 unit price, you don't really know what strings to pull to lower the cost. You know, you could say like, oh, my bag is $30. Well, you know, what happens if I want to change this piece of hardware, or change this leather, or change this fabric? Will that reduce my price? You have no idea, because you have no idea what the actual product or the materials or the leather or that hardware actually cost. So you have no way of finding the exact material that's used on your product either. And so if you want to switch your product to a different vendor, your product has to look the same, feel the same, and perform the same. Obviously, it could be improved upon if you need to, but especially if your product is already in retail and on shelves, it does have to look and feel and perform exactly the same. You have to spend usually months developing just that material alone. So transparency is key. Now, if you're already working on with a company and you have that transparency, great. If you don't have it, maybe keep an eye on what your factory is not being transparent about, and keep your other eye on looking for other vendors. I once had a company tell me that our pricing was so transparent, they didn't even know how to negotiate with us because we provided them with too much detail. We gave them a bag bill of materials quote with every material listed, the consumption rate, the unit price, profit margins, overhead, our profit margins, labor rate, whatever it was, you name it. And they hadn't seen that before, and we're grateful for our transparency. I told them the levers that we could pull to reduce those costs. We worked at it, we did it, and we earned their business, and we've been making bags for them for the past 5 years. So transparency goes a long way to building that mutual trust. Now, I will say here, when just a side note, when sourcing, a lot of people turn to Alibaba, which is fine, because that's what you know and that's what you've heard of. So I will say that if you're looking to make a product that's relatively simple, Alibaba should do the trick. You'll probably be able to find exactly what you're looking for. If you're looking to create something that's innovative and something, you know, I would call, quote, Kickstarterable, I don't know if I'd recommend Alibaba for any complex goods. I've found that most of the good turnkey vendors don't need Alibaba because they're usually referred to by word of mouth and recommendations. On top of that, for products that have, you know, different scopes of manufacturing involved, Alibaba sort of pigeonholes a lot of companies to be specifically a plastic factory or specifically a metal factory or specifically a bag factory. So I would just kind of keep that in mind. So there's one thing I do want to mention in regards to general communication. We've seen our fair share of people come across our way with vendors and companies, and you know, we've seen rude vendors, we've seen rude clients, and you know, when companies want to are always looking to reduce, it tends to turn a lot of factories off. And you might find that this is because you have the purchasing power, but I do want to just make a point to say that factories will actually have a much easier time dropping you than you think in general. So value engineering is what I would instead look towards if you want to reduce and reduce and reduce. When you're going through the sample and quoting process, value engineering is an exercise that you might not actually know exists. I've heard on previous Q&As with, I think the last one was Sourcify, you know, somebody was asking, how do I get my product quotes or product pricing down, especially if it's too high? Well, you want to look at value engineering. Value engineering isn't something that's typically offered to companies or clients because it's usually something that will only benefit you. And it rarely benefits the factories. So just look at it this way. If you lower the cost of your goods, you're paying the factory less money. You're paying them a slightly less percentage on their overhead and profit margins. So their margins all reduce. So to do this, you actually need to know that value engineering exists, which I think a lot of people in this industry already do know that, but if you are new to this space, it might be a new concept for you. So knowing this, if you're looking to reduce the cost of your goods, there are usually 3 levers to pull. 1, materials. The cost of materials is obviously very important and what drives the rest of the price. 2, cost of labor or services. And 3, the factory overhead and profit margins. So these levers, of course, are only made possible if you have a transparent bill of materials quote. If you have a $30 unit price, you have no idea which lever to pull and how to get that pricing down. So in my experience, if you do get a transparent quote, always go for number 1, the cost of materials. The cost of materials, so long as 2 and 3 seem reasonable to you, and for the most part, everyone's labor and overhead and profit will be reasonable. But I've also seen factories charge 70% margins before. So if you're aware that there's a 70% margin being charged in your product, that's a problem. And you should address that first. So, but most OH&P should really live around 25 to 30% of the total of your cost of goods sold. Oops. So if labor and OH&P look good, focus your efforts on lowering the cost of the product materials itself. This benefits you not only in reducing your price, but you can pull comparable quotes from other vendors for the entire product or just for components. You'll be able to drive the market price of your own cost of goods sold with maximum efficiency. You will get effectively market pricing. So one of the things that we do as a company when we first source is we take a design and we might send it out to 4 or 5 different factories that we know and trust, and they'll all provide us with pricing. That in itself can get you an idea of what your market pricing of your product should look like. And once you do have that market pricing, you'll understand where other people are coming in for a quote. Let's say for this Peak Design tripod here in this picture, what a carbon leg might cost out of factory A versus factory E. So if, in any case, if it all looks good, the OH&P looks good, you should know that with today's B2C market online, that there are so many marketing strategies that can bring customers direct to your website, where you as a brand can realize a large chunk of those, typical 3x, 4x, 5x margins. And when I mean 3 to 5x, I mean you're multiplying the cost of goods by 3x to 4x to 5x in order to sell your product, right? A bag that costs $30 might be $120 in retail markets. So traditional retailers are generally becoming a little less and less utilized, especially with COVID, except if your product is on Amazon, which in general it has to be. But in general, your ability to make profits far outweigh a factory's ability to. For example, we have a client who told me recently that if they sell 5,000 units of their $350 product, they will make over $1 million in profit and they can quit their day job. While I know that the factory maybe makes $40,000 on it and they have to employ 100,000 or 100 workers just to make it for them. So after all, you understand that they are usually earning around 10% in profits on the COGS, while you're potentially earning 400 to 500%. In any case, value engineering requires industry expertise, product expertise, and good sourcing. So how do you lower your cost? You counter-source your materials. You negotiate with vendors and sub-vendors, or you need to change your design. If you have a mildly complex or a very complex product, you need good engineers on your vendor side to assist you in optimizing your product. Finding out, as I was saying earlier, the ability to digest and read and comprehend your designs and drawings is crucial. And you want them to provide you engineering feedback, or what we call a DFM report, design for manufacturing report, so that you know how to make your design more cost-effective or more manufacturable. And a company that can provide you a good DFM report is definitely one you want to keep around. So planning for mass production for your crowdfunding campaign, there are two strategies or a few options here that I am aware of, really, and that I would advise you for. This helps you plan your production and helps you manage your timelines and your cash. So the two scenarios are this. If you don't have cash, be risk averse. Collect your number of backers and plan to start your production as soon as that money comes in. If you have any money up front and you know what kind of volume you'll need for your production run, you should spend that money on procuring any long lead time materials. For bags, for instance, YKK generally has a long lead time. For PCBs, a lot of components via DigiKey require 3 months just to get components made. Some known hardware companies tend to run behind schedule, etc. So if you have some cash, get that lead time issue out of your way by procuring those materials first. It's usually not that expensive and it could save you days, maybe weeks. That said, you'll run into the scenario that 95% of Kickstarter campaigns run into, which is delivery 4 to 6 months after your campaign is over. So for however long you run your campaign for, 30 or 60 days, you will receive your money 17 days after it's over. At that point, you start your purchase order and you start the lead time clock, and you'll receive that product months later after some of the momentum and the hype from your Kickstarter has started to dry up. The second scenario is if you have cash, you have the option to take on some risk, which could reap some good rewards if you believe in your sales and your product that much. You can pay the deposit on your purchase order within the first week of your campaign to start the lead time clock, maybe 40 to 70 days earlier than scenario 1. And you'd be able to deliver your product maybe 2-3 months after your campaign instead of 4 to 6 months after. And people will keep talking about you. I know I've listened to the founders of Gelop speak, and having people talk about you is one of the key, one of the keys to making your brand work. You can build a good brand momentum, and you'll earn an impressed customer base. So this is how Peter Daring, the founder of Peak Design, started his company. He conjured up, $50,000 from his bank account and from his family, and he placed a purchase order before his Kickstarter even launched for Capture version 1 back in 2011. And I'm not saying that that's the reason Peak is who they are today, but that bet on himself was a catalyst for things to come. So when you're planning your quantities, a decent rule of thumb is to take your first week of backers and products sold, multiply it by 3, and that's a good rule of thumb to plan for your Kickstarter specific quantity. Usually you'll see a large burst up front for that first week, and then you'll start seeing kind of the slow, I'm looking at the wrong way. You'll start seeing the slow and steady increase, and then at the end you'll see kind of another tail up. So that each one of those segments is basically 1/3 of your total Kickstarter quantity. Then you want to add in, if you're doing Indiegogo or Indiegogo on demand, another 50% of that total Kickstarter quantity, plus another 50% of that total Kickstarter quantity for your first round of inventory after your Kickstarters have been delivered. This is this obviously isn't true for everybody, but it's a decent formula to just kind of go off of, especially for smaller scales Kickstarters. Because the worst thing that can happen to you is you have too much inventory and you can't sell it. And then the second worst thing that can happen to you is you have too little inventory and you have too many sales and you're leaving money on the table. So this formula here can provide a decent middle ground for you. Under promising and over delivering. This is, a basic concept in the professional world, but I cannot overstate how important it is to under promise and over deliver as a Kickstarter brand. Get the advice from your factories and your partners in supply chain and settle on a confident delivery date together. Always build in buffers for your timeline. A huge mistake is setting an aggressive delivery schedule and not being able to meet it. Overpromising and under-delivering is one of the surest ways to become a one-hit wonder. Backers will blast you, and it'll put more and more added pressure on yourself to deliver. And that pressure comes in the form of air freight that you're gonna have to pay for, expedited shipping, and segmented deliveries instead of putting all your product into one container, because you're facing unnecessary customer pressure that you've put on yourself. So I have a customer that that aggressively planted their delivery dates to backers way too early against my advice, and they absolutely paid for it. I'm not going to name who they are, but we told them that your product was challenging industry tolerances because your product was too small, and our factories weren't sure if the yield on these would actually be successful. So we're going to face challenges on yield. We're going to face a lot of failures right off the bat. And by no means did we have a delivery schedule that could be settled. Well, they ended up launching their Kickstarter, and they put in a delivery date of 2 months after the Kickstarter was over. We saw that after it went live, and our jaws just dropped. I mean, we knew from the get-go that their delivery date had no chance. And lo and behold, as a month passed by, that published delivery date, they were getting lit up on the comment boards, and they even asked me to write a letter to be their scapegoat to backers to help ease and explain the situation. That situation was our customer laid out too aggressive of a schedule against our advice, and frankly, they deserve your trolls. Of course, I said it more professionally, but you get the drift. So I'll kind of detour a little bit here towards COVID and how this has affected the landscape of manufacturing. This explanation here will seem simple because it is, but COVID has resulted in higher unemployment. Higher unemployment means less disposable income. Less disposable income means less products purchased. Less products purchased means less revenue for brands and less revenue for vendors. And those lesser revenues for vendors means more layoffs and cutting costs for factories. More layoffs and cutting costs for the factories means less ability to scale and less general support. So we've recently had an issue pop up where a factory was selected to make a wallet, a cut and sew wallet. The design of the wallet changed over the course of some iterations and required at the end using some heavy labor and heat compression. The factory that we selected initially, they didn't really have many heat compression machines. They had maybe 2. And they wanted the business, but they also had just cut their manpower by 50% because of COVID. And they're not in a place to invest in more heat compression machines or more labor just to support the project. So they're bowing out of the project, and it has to be resourced. In the pre-COVID world, this factory had plenty of manpower and would have happily put up more machines and bought more machines and hired additional workers to continue their support of the project. So the manufacturing landscape around Asia has been suffering, except for those in the right industry. Those industries are like home goods, camping, gardening, gaming. Like those industries have seen a huge boost, while travel accessories, luggage, luxury bags have mostly seen a huge reduction in revenue, anywhere between 50 to 80%. And as a result, we've seen a lot of factories close their doors. And I mention this because I want you to be mindful that factories aren't in the same financial position that they were 7 months ago. Be mindful of a factory's finances if you can, and make sure they're not on the precipice of shutting down while you're trying to make products with them. So despite the reduction of manpower across the board, it does mean that there are a lot more available unemployed factory workers in Asia. So it does mean, though, that if you do have a product that fits in their wheelhouse, factories will hire and will ramp up for your mass production accordingly. So that's not something you necessarily need to be worried about. Many of you here are aware of the tariffs with the US tensions between China and the US. Many of you are aware of these tariffs that the administration put in place of plus 15 to 25% on goods coming from China to the US. And if you haven't known about it, or if you haven't thought about it much until now, those tariffs are coming out of US company and US consumer pockets. And it's a huge tax on the American people, and it has benefited almost nobody. And I'm not going to get political about it. I do live in Portland, but it hasn't helped American manufacturing either, which is what tariffs are supposed to protect. Tariffs traditionally are put in place to protect domestic manufacturing on specific fields of interest, to keep a labor force employed by equalizing the cost of goods. Now, I'm not super well versed in American manufacturing, but almost every conversation I've had with made in the USA companies has told me that American manufacturing, especially at our scales here, is expensive, slow, and difficult to scale. In a perfect world, all products would be made in the US. But in reality, made in the USA is really hard. I spoke with a US plastic injection factory owner 2 days ago who told me that he has a tool that makes plastic forks that cost him $100,000 to make. And I told him the most I've ever seen paid for a plastic tool was about $10,000 in China. The tool for your forks would probably cost around $5,000. I also spoke to the head of a bag and apparel brand in San Francisco who makes everything in the US. And he told me, this was like 5 years ago, if you like pulling teeth, then US manufacturing is for you. That US apparel brand, you know what they charge for a standard black rain jacket? $450. The North Face also makes a simple black rain jacket, and they manufacture their jackets out of Nicaragua and China, and it costs $250. I have another company trying to deliver motorized toothbrushes, but they haven't been able to deliver to their customers because their US manufacturer failed them in quality, price, and speed. Anyways, you get the point. Tariffs are not protecting American manufacturing, and they're expensive and unnecessary. And I'm also not even sure that if Biden is elected in November, that he will roll back these tariffs. Even if he does, companies have more reasons beyond tariffs to leave China. What China is doing to the Uyghurs is inhumane. China's aggression towards Hong Kong law, and of course those tariffs, these are very big factors that companies are that we're starting to see companies depart. So there's a shift happening in front of our eyes. And it doesn't mean that China isn't still the dominant and best country to run a supply chain through, because it is. It just means that select industries where you have alternate supply chains in other countries are now seen as more viable options. Vietnam for bags, Thailand for automotive parts, Sri Lanka for apparel, etc. There are some products where the only real option is to manufacture in China, and if that is the case, that's okay. Supply chains in other countries are generally just weaker, less fluid, which means they have longer lead times, maybe higher costs. So you might not even be saving any money by leaving China. And then lastly, the last thing I'll talk about here is a little secret in the industry called GSP. The Generalized System of Preferences, which specifies that certain products from certain countries can be imported into the United States tariff-free, which means 0% duty if you can prove that 35% or more of your product is made in that country, or that those components that go into your product have had what we call double transformation done in that country. The hard part about this is it's just harder to make products in some of these other countries unless you already have an experienced source. And the other problem is that even if you find a source, they're unlikely willing to take on new customers because they're in such high demand. So, and the last thing to consider about GSP is that GSP is political. and it is prone to change. So if a new president or existing president comes in and wants to do away with the entire GSP program, all the benefits of GSP go away very quickly. So I hope some of the things I've talked about here today has helped you, whether you're trying to get a product started, a Kickstarter going, or are working with a company already and are looking for a few strategies. And I hope it's been helpful. Tom?
Yeah, thank you so much, Patrick. That's awesome. Yeah, super, super insightful. That's awesome. We do have a time for a couple questions here. And so I will jump right on in. So Jake asks, do you also handle sporting goods, surfboards, inflatables, etc.?
Yes. I mean, in reality, we don't have a lot of experience in making goods like that, like kayaks and paddleboards. We do have factories that we know in China that do make those. We are happy to make a connection and get some quotes if that's something that you're looking for.
Awesome. So I'll let you guys connect. So that's actually a question I have for you, Patrick, is if people want to work with you, what's the best way to connect? Is your email address that's listed right there?
Yes. That would be the quickest way to get a hold of me, and then we can schedule a Zoom call and chat a little bit about what you're looking for.
Fantastic. So John asks, do you source in overseas mostly or options within the US manufacturers? Let me get in on this, Patrick, because I can feel that, because I'm right there too. I've been, it's funny because I've actually gone with some of our clients to China to work with their manufacturers. I've been in the factories. I've seen it. I've toured US factories. I've toured Chinese Taiwanese, like all of that. By the way, Taiwanese manufacturing is incredible. That's a personal favorite. But anyways, yeah, so basically, like, when it comes to the end of the day, you want to be manufacturing the best products possible. Well, it's probably a good idea to be going with the people that have been doing it the longest, the best, like all that stuff. Like a lot of times, like you see like made in USA, you think that it's better. That's not the case at all. I mean, there's a reason why this was made in China. There's a reason, because it's not because it's just cheaper. That's not the reason. It's because it's the best, like the tolerance, the quality, all of that stuff, like the best. Like you want to go with the person that's, if you're gonna, do you want to hire like the, star quarterback who's, got the record, who's done it, or somebody that, just learned how to play football, right? Like you're not going to do that. You're going to go with the person who has the experience, that has the, the knowledge, that has the team and is able to do it for you. It also happens, that's what's crazy too, is it also happens to be in a lot of cases cheaper. So like definitely.
China, yeah, absolutely. And China's built for scale. If you're, it's important to know that when you're selecting your factory and your vendors, that they have the ability to scale. Because if you do grow and you go from like Peak Design, $700,000 company to 70 million in 8 years, you have to know that the company can scale with you, and you have to be competitive with your price, with your product pricing in the market. And if you're going to be like that, American made in USA apparel company that charges $450 for a jacket, you're not going to be able to grow because you just frankly have less demand. You'll keep your made in USA loyalists, which is great, but it will significantly limit your ability to scale at a larger scale, at a larger volume.
Yep. Next question, when vetting out, how do you protect yourself? So how do you deal with like IP theft, all of that jazz?
We work with companies that we are familiar with, that we have good relationships with. We have a team of 16 people, 8 of which are here in the United States, 8 of which are in China, Vietnam, and Taiwan. And we work with companies that we know and we like. We've made thousands of products, and we've brought thousands of products to market already. So we know the manufacturing landscape, and we know who to go to for certain products. And we want to make sure that when we're bringing a project in, that it's going to a factory's wheelhouse, not something that is a fringe product. So we want to make sure that, in regards to IP, NDAs are formed. We have an attorney, a law firm based out of Hong Kong that does a lot of work for us in those scenarios. But so far with us, it's never been an issue.
Awesome. Great answer. Next question. How willing are factories to do iterations with you during the product development phase? Should we source manufacturers only after we have a locally produced prototype product with engineering drawings?
Not necessarily. You can do locally produced prototypes and then bring it overseas to, wherever you're going to have it made. There are tons of rapid prototyping shops in China as well and in Vietnam. Those rapid prototyping shops can get you parts made in a week, and it's going to be cheaper than what you'd get here in the United States. So if you're looking to build products, let's call it metals and plastics, they can cut and do wax investment casting to make simple prototypes for you. And then we can bring it to a contract manufacturer who can assemble it if it requires that. Now, you're not going to get the same performance because it's manufactured differently. But if you're looking for proof of concept, you need something to bring to, shows, or you need something to bring to people who want to buy your product. It's a good strategy to also try to prototype it there, because when you're going to work with a factory overseas, for them to have some familiarity with your product going into it will benefit you, and could probably save you, at least a month or two of time.
Yeah, definitely. Back on that IP question too, I'll share one thing. My biggest piece of advice too is don't slow down. I can't tell you how many people I've seen literally put their life on hold for years because they're so afraid of their IP being stolen. And by that time, their IP is going to get reinvented somewhere else. So that's yeah. I
would also, on just, tagging on that note here, don't let IP really stop you from anything. If your product is good, it will get copied. It is not, Peak Design, their captures. We've seen fake captures made in Taiwan, sold in camera shops. Fidget Cube was a perfect example. If any of you followed what Fidget Cube did, they launched their Kickstarter campaign. It grew so fast and so big that manufacturers in China just saw the product on their Kickstarter page and started making the products, and they ended up beating ANSI Labs to market because they just reacted so quickly. You're not going to be able to prevent it. You can spend years in litigation, and it's just going to end up costing you a ton of money, and it's just going to be a huge drain on your time and resources.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, Netcamic, we had a huge problem with that when we were launching that campaign. $1 million campaign, tons of knockoffs. But again, drive forward, now it's an 8-figure brand, so it's awesome. Do you charge, we've got time for maybe 1-2 more questions. Do you charge to provide a quote?
No. For our company is a completely risk-free company. So we want to meet you. We want to understand your product, what you're looking to do, how to bring it to market, understand what kind of scale you're trying to achieve. If you're moonlighting as this is your second job, is creating a product, that's your ability to scale may become a little bit less. But for us, we're a completely risk-free company to work with. You provide us drawings, we'll help you get you quotes. If you want to work with us, great. If you don't want to work with us, then I understand, but we'll do our best to try to earn your business. And for us, we only make margin on every unit sold. So we are, in this together with you. We're putting our time and resources to help you develop your product and help you build a plan to scale for your Kickstarter. Yeah.
Awesome. So next question for you. This is going to be the last one. Do you also provide prototyping services? Do you source high-tech gadgets?
Yes, we do consumer electronics as well. In terms of prototyping, it really depends on what your product is and how it can be prototyped. A lot of products that require very complex pieces might take a little bit longer. If you're waiting on specific components for an electronic piece from a DigiKey or a Mouser or an Atmel, you just have to wait for that. But in terms of the other parts like housings, surface finishes, functions, we can help prototype by either using CNC or by creating what we call a soft mold. Soft tools are made out of aluminum instead of steel, and are probably good for 1/100th of the life cycle that a steel mold can make. But it's significantly cheaper. It can produce maybe 100, 1,000 parts of something if that's what you're looking for.
Awesome. Great answer. So there's, again, a ton of people, I'm sure have a ton of questions for Patrick still. And so again, guys, you can see his email address at the bottom there, Patrick. I'll actually type it out in chat for you. I got you guys. So you can just copy and paste that. So get in there, learn from Patrick. As he said, reach out. If you've got more questions or anything like that, do not hesitate to reach out to him. He's an awesome guy to work with and super approachable, as you can see, great guy. And so definitely get in there. And so that is it for today. Patrick, thank you so much for hopping on here. This was incredible. I loved following along, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with everybody here.
My pleasure. I hope you guys all found it helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. And for everybody else, again, today is still going. We still got plenty of more. We've got a fantastic 7-figure crowdfunded panel. That would be the one I would say, do not miss that. That's going to be epic. Got some like 7-figure, crowdfunded people. So get there. Tons of people that have raised over 7 figures. And so, just so stoked to have you on here, Patrick. And I can't wait to see you all in the next one.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for putting this whole thing on. This is wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, take care. I'll catch you later.